the Leon Charney Report. And now, here is your host, Leon Charney.
So what else is new? Bibi Netanyahu's in trouble, Bill Clinton's in trouble, so what do? We bring on a few experts who tell you how to adjust to the neurotic feelings you may be having if you're Jewish and if you're an American. It takes about, I guess, 98% of our audience, unless you're foreign and you're in the country illegally, and then you make up your own mind. When you go back to Mexico, it doesn't look too good over there either. We have Charles Kupchan with us today, our scholar from the Council on Foreign Relations, a former aide to President William Jefferson Clinton. And we'll talk about that for a few minutes, and then we'll bring on Judith Miller, who is our Middle East expert, very close to King Hussein and the Arab leaders, and she'll have a lot to say about the Middle East. Charles, welcome.
Good to be back, Leon.
Bill Clinton, going to make it?
Bill Clinton is going to make it. He's got a huge amount of staying power. He, I think, probably hasn't done anything egregiously wrong. He just does things that are sort of in that gray zone. And I think the real problem is that to some extent it casts a somewhat of an unseemly shadow over the White House. And you just get the sense that there's a lot of stuff going on there that shouldn't. Not that it's illegal, but that this is not the way that the White House should be conducting its affairs.
Any difference in the fact that maybe he came from poor background and he didn't have the wealth, the plethora of interests, let's say, that George Bush had, who was a patrician basically, and came from old line money, and I don't think he had a struggle as much as Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton lost his father young. I mean, he really made his own way, and he did it in a very, very exciting way, because he did it really on his own. Everybody knows the graphic picture of Bill Clinton shaking the hand of John F. Kennedy when he was 17 years old. I mean, you got to give him a lot of credit. I've read a lot about Bill Clinton, and he's done it. And my guess is that this is not a criminal.
No, I mean, I think that the press got it right when they looked at his childhood and they said that his background helps to explain why he wants to be loved, why it's hard for him to do things like displease people, fire people. He doesn't like to make people unhappy. I think, though, that the kind of borderline behavior that we're seeing in terms of fundraising, who's in the White House, who's on Air Force One, that's not so much Clinton's problem as it is the sort of degradation of our political system. He's just playing along with a system that is somewhat out of control. It's money, it's media, it's Hollywood. He's perfected the system. So I think to some extent the problem is not Clinton. It's that our political system has been professionalized and heavily reliant on money and buying time on the media.
Charles, you're an expert on foreign relations. Can anybody buy into our political system by contributions? I mean, it's a very heavy accusation. You travel around the world. We're going to talk about, you just came back from France and you discussed the Middle East there, and we want to go through that. But let's get domestic for a minute. Do you think that China really brought into the American policy?
I think that a lot of foreign countries try to have influence, and they do so either explicitly by trying to give contributions, but more often it's through lobby groups. We see, for example, today, the Romanians pressing really hard so that they're not left out of NATO. I had someone in my office an hour ago, the Romanian Consul General in New York, trying to make the case to me why Romania should be included. They've got the foreign minister and other high-level people in Washington. So a lot of it is direct pressure.
He comes to see you for what purpose? To try and influence you to write about it?
To write about it, to convince me that Romania should be included, so that when I debate this issue in Washington or in a newspaper, that I make that point. It's basically PR directed not just to the policymaker, but outsiders.
Consul General, I think that's fair play.
Oh, no. I don't think there's anything inappropriate about it. I think where it gets problematic is when the system of politics is so reliant on money, and you have a lot of money coming in from foreign governments and foreign companies. That's when you really have to be careful about it.
Well, do you think the Chinese concertedly made an effort to buy their way into the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and thereafter, in a sense, influence Clinton? You think that?
I don't think we know enough about the full story there. I think that in many of these cases, you're in that gray zone between something that's just plain inappropriate and something that is good and above board. It's in that murky area, and that's why each of these cases, I think, has to be looked at on its own merits, and we need to know the facts.
By the way, should Romania be part of NATO?
Well, I think this whole idea of enlarging NATO at this point is loopy.
Yeah,
right? We don't get anything out of it.
Right.
We piss the Russians off. We leave Romania, Bulgaria, the Baltics, Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus in the middle of nowhere, scared of Russia, but the West says, we don't really want you right now. And so I just think it's crazy. And
whose idea is this? Albright?
No, it really came out of a weird confluence of different strands. You had the far right wing, people like Kissinger and Brzezinski, who basically said, divide Europe and get it over with. Keep the Russians over there. It's more stable without them. And then you had sort of more liberals inside the Clinton administration who saw this as a way of uniting Europe, building a democratic community. And the problem is that you can't have it both ways. And the bottom line is NATO is still a military alliance.
That's right.
It draws a line in the sand. It says, we're in, you're out. And that's not what we need right now. We need something more flexible, more ambiguous.
But NATO is an umbrella of a military alliance. That's basically what it is. So, but what these people are trying to do now, Brzezinski and Kissinger, use it in a sense, in a different way to unite Europe. Is that what they're trying to do?
No, I think that they actually have a coherent, logical position, which is
divide it,
get a new line, make sure Germany stays bound in Western Europe, that Russia goes off on its own.
So what do you gain? The balance of power?
Yeah. It's a very hardcore, traditional realpolitik view of the world. To my mind, it's outmoded. We don't need new dividing lines. We don't need to put tanks on the Polish-Belarus border. That's what we've been doing the last 40 years. What we need to do is reach out to Russia, embrace them, give them a market economy, send them IBM technicians and accountants so that they become accustomed to a Western democratic way of life. And by drawing a line, we're basically saying, we think you're other, you don't belong with us.
Right.
I think that's a key mistake.
Who has, in the government today, Clinton administration, who thinks the way you do?
On this question?
On this question. It's a very important question.
It's complicated. I think that the president, Tony Lake, were very predisposed in favor of enlargement. Strobe Talbot was initially against it. He came around.
He's a big Russian.
He's a big Russia guy, but he is now in favor of it. The party that's been most hesitant is the Pentagon. I don't know what Cohen thinks about it, but I think Perry was reticent. He came along with it. But to the Pentagon, which is already strapped for resources, to be told, now you have to go defend a whole new host of countries that have military infrastructure that's 40 years out of date, they don't want to do that.
Why did Perry leave?
I think he got tired. I mean, the burnout rate there is incredible. They take over your life, in the inside.
You burnt down 1 year.
Well, I was exhausted, but I also had other opportunities, like coming on the Leon Charney show.
I would give anything in the world to do that, I'll tell you. Did you knew Tony Lake very well, didn't you?
Not before, but we worked closely together.
Were you upset the way his whole resignation took place, the CIA business? Yeah. Is he a good guy?
He's a good guy. He's got a great deal of integrity. And this comes back to this whole question of the political system's out of control. It's petty. You get someone up who's bright, who's got integrity. You rake him through the coals. You turn up everything. And I think he couldn't take it anymore.
Would he have been tough enough to run the CIA?
I'm not sure that he's the best person in the sense that Tony is more of a thinker than he is a manager. And
well,
to some extent,
the senators getting at that, in a sense?
Well, if that
did it in a
wasn't
nasty
the case,
way.
Yeah. If they had said, let's talk about managerial skills,
right.
I don't have a problem with that.
Well, at the end, that's what one of these senators said. If he couldn't do this correctly, then how could he manage the CIA?
Yeah, but the bottom line is...
They weren't elegant.
They were
not
looking
elegant.
for dirt. They were saying, who were these people? They were trying to cast aspersions on him, not just as a manager versus a thinker, but that he was doing things that were inappropriate, and I just think that those are unfounded.
Where is he today? Do you ever see from here? Hear from him?
I think he is resting. I think he's debating offers from various universities to come for a few years or longer to just teach and write. I don't know whether he wants to go back to his original University of Mount Holyoke or not.
You follow all the ex-NSC men like Poindexter and McFarland, and you don't know where they are, huh? Allen, you remember a man named Allen? He was an NSC man. They don't have alumni meetings, huh?
No. Well, the ones that are in jail do, because they see them in various courtyards. But no, I don't know where they are. A lot of them are in the broader Washington community. They're at think tanks.
You know Sandy Berger?
I do.
Nice, robust Jewish boy.
He's a good guy. Very good, very up, especially on questions of trade and economic relations, which is obviously what the Clinton administration has at the forefront of its foreign policy.
Do they call people from the Council on Foreign Relations a lot for advice? Do they?
There's a lot of exchange of ideas on the phone. Sometimes there'll be meetings where they come up to New York, or we have meetings in the State Department. There's a lot of give and take, a lot of outreach, much more so than in other countries where you tend to have a government community and an academic community, and they're separate.
The Vice President also has a National Security Advisor of his own, or he works through the President?
Well, he has a National Security Advisor named Leon Firth, who is also appointed to the National Security Council, so he wears two hats. And he actually is a quite influential player, both because he's very close to Gore, but also because he's had direct access through the NSC.
You think Gore's been burnt? That's a political question, by collecting money in this mosque, etc., etc.?
No, I think that stuff is going to disappear.
Really? You think he'll overcome it?
Yeah, I think that Gore has some larger political problems that have to do with his electability and
his charisma.
His charisma. And those are the things he's going to have to work hard at in terms of defeating a Republican challenger. But I think the kind of question of making a phone call from this office as opposed to his cell phone in the parking lot, this is the type of stuff that is on the Washington Post front page for a day or two, and then everybody says, enough already.
Madeleine Albright, see anything electric about it so far, or she's just going to toe the line?
I think she's actually done a good job. She's articulate.
Because you didn't think she was going to be very creative. That's what
I still don't think she's going to be that creative and visionary. But I do think that she's going to get the message out. She's good at press conferences. She speaks in sound bites. She is a kind of person who says, these are the three reasons. So the times that I've seen her responding to questions from the press, I think she's done a very effective job of communicating the basic ideas behind policy, which is key in an era when the mind of the American public is up for grabs. I think she should spend as much time in Missouri and Iowa
you said that last time.
As she should in Europe or Asia.
Somalia. You just came back from France. You had an interesting dialogue there with the French who really want to be active in the Middle East.
Tell us about it. It was a kind of gab fest, about 15 Americans and 15 French, about...
All intellectuals?
I would say it was 75% government officials, 25% outsiders.
Who were the Americans?
They were, from the State Department, they were Bob Pelletreau, who just left as Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs. Marty Indyk, the ambassador to Israel, was supposed to be there, but veered off.
He's very busy.
He's busy. He's got his plate full. Skip Gneem, who's a deputy ambassador at the UN, was there. So ambassadorial rank Americans. And from the French side, roughly the equivalent. We spent about 2 hours with the foreign minister. And the idea was to try to figure out why the French and the Americans are always biting at each other's ankles, particularly in the Middle East, Iran, Iraq, and the peace process. And one of the interesting conclusions we came to in the end of the day is that there isn't all that much daylight between the French and the American position. It's more style and theater, which is that the French still think of themselves as a great power.
Yeah.
They don't like it when they're cut out. So if the U.S. does this, they say, we're going to do this, not because they disagree with American policy, but because they don't want to be seen as kowtowing to the United States.
All right, we're going to cut for a commercial. We'll come right back. But ask Charlie why everybody wants to be involved with the Middle East. If I were Bibi Netanyahu, I'd probably want to be in Norway tonight.
Zaire.
Zaire. We'll take you with Mobutu. Anyway, we'll be right back. We're back. I am Leon Charney, and we got the hot team here tonight. We got Judith Miller, who's written that great book about the Muslims in the Middle East. Everybody knows her. She's an expert on the Middle East, good friend of King Hussein. King Hussein, by the way, is adored and loved by the Israelis since he visited that country after those 9 girls were killed. I mean, I heard a story. I can't tell you too much about it because it's a little bit in camera, but I understand when he heard about this event, he went ashen. He felt it. I mean, this was no baloney. And we have Charles Kupchan, who's filling us in about how France wants to get involved in the Middle East. Isn't that unusual? Why, Charles?
I think in the French case, it's because they have not yet come to terms with the fact that they aren't a first-rate power. They have colonial interests in the Middle East. They were obviously there a long time in Lebanon and Syria.
They didn't do so well in Algeria, did they?
No, I mean, like in most European powers, they got chased out with their tail between their legs. And then I think on Iran and Iraq, there are some substantive differences that have to do with, do you take in a regime like Iran and try to box it in with no rays of daylight, or do you do what the Europeans have called constructive engagement, which is try to draw them out, trade with them, conditional, if you behave, then these good things will happen to you. And the U.S. basically says, this is a bloody bad regime, let's close the door. And I think there is a substantive difference.
So it was worthwhile?
I think it was worthwhile because it to some extent broke down some of the stereotypes that Americans have about the French and the French have about the U.S. Because there is a lot of reflexive view in the State Department that if it's French, it must be to undermine American policy. And in France, if it's American, it must be to stick it in the face of the French. And so I think it was atmospherically, it was a useful meeting.
Felix Royatin, new ambassador to France, a good friend of yours, I'm sure, or yours, Judy.
Very good.
I know him a long time also. He knows a lot about derivatives and puts and calls, Charlie. He can help you there.
Well, you once told me that derivatives were the future of the banking system, so I'm still waiting.
You know who was lobbying for that job? You ever hear the name Samuel Pissarr?
No.
Very famous
Yes, a French
lawyer.
lawyer.
Dual citizenship. He really wanted to become the ambassador to France. But how would that work, Judy?
Well, I think it's extraordinary that they chose someone as qualified as Felix Rowan. Given the record of the administration, this soon-to-be nomination stands out for it. It's New York's loss, however, because he's done so much for the city. He speaks perfect French. Recipient of the Légion d'honneur, someone who knows how to talk about the financial crises which France faces now. I think it's an inspired choice, and that they're really lucky to have him.
You know what somebody at the White House told me? He said, this guy's been hanging around looking for a job, so finally we found a place for him. Judy comes out with this tremendous tribute because he did save New York City with the Mac bonds and all that, and he's a great investment banker. And so they finally make a really good, because I think he wanted to go on the Fed. He really did, but it didn't work out for him. He wanted to get to the Federal Reserve. And Alan Greenspan did it. And you know Andrea Mitchell, too? Mm-hmm. Did you go to the wedding?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I don't do buses.
You may well have taken the post just to live in the house.
Right.
I mean, we're talking nice house in the center of Paris.
Very nice house, right.
But at this dinner last week where Clinton was roasted with the radio and television correspondents, someone said that Andrea Mitchell promised that when she married Greenspan, she'd only talk into his good ear. Tough stuff, isn't it? Want to hear the other one? Larry King, he's been married about 9 times. So President Clinton or somebody, the comic may have said no one was served food at Larry King's table because he married the waitress. Anyway, Judy, let's get to serious things like Bibi Netanyahu.
That by you is serious.
I think it's serious. Maybe.
Is this serious? Is this crisis serious?
I think it's very, very serious. What do you think?
So do I. Potentially. It depends on whether or not the state attorney and the attorney general act on the recommendation and actually indict a sitting Israeli prime minister, which of course has never happened in Israeli history. So.
There's never been an Israeli prime minister who has been, in a sense, called to a grand jury. Mm-hmm. Now, this was happened weeks ago. We said it on our show. In Israel, it's the English system, so they give you a warning that anything you say is perjury. It's the same as the grand jury system. The question not only is, will he be indicted? The question is, can he sustain his government even though he's not indicted? Because there's a higher calling for public officials, and will his coalition breakup. Sharansky, who's sort of a moralist and is in the government there, has always said that if it doesn't look too good, that he's pulling out.
Yes.
The third way, which is Kahalani, which is he's a pretty good, honest guy, and he's a centrist. I think he might pull out if things get weak. But interestingly enough, the right wing may pull out against him. Meridor, the finance minister. So I think he's in trouble.
What's it going to come down to? Is it, did he know and did he participate in this deal
Yes.
on the Attorney General?
Apparently there are at least 2 charges that are being brought or could potentially be brought against the 3 of them. And one, of course, is bribery or...
It's fraud, Judy. It's dairy.
It's dairy. Avigdor Lieberman.
Lieberman, that's his Director General,
Director
the Russian
General.
boy. The third one is Tzachi
Hanegbi, the Justice Minister.
The Justice Minister.
And the other is this breach of trust, which is an amazing charge.
Well, when you swear to uphold the laws of the country, it's a fiduciary duty. You know what fiduciary is, right?
Is it related to puts and calls?
No, it's Cook Island Trust.
But no, I mean, I think it's very serious. The question I have is whether or not the people who want out of this government for perhaps very different reasons will use this as the excuse to jump ship.
Exactly. That's a good point. Charlie, in your opinion, this will hold up the peace process?
I think Bibi is holding up the peace process, and that in some ways, I think that this is the first time when I can say with comfort that I think that Israel is the problem rather than Arafat or the Palestinian side, and that's new. And I think that one has to think about what's the best way to break this deadlock, to push Bibi forward or to change Israeli public opinion so Bibi doesn't clamp down on and hold up the peace process. And this may be, in some ways, an optimistic development in that respect.
What? Because you're saying this is the way to get rid of him, or
possibly?
I think.
Do you believe that
sure.
that he was wrong on the issue of Har Homa? Do you believe that?
Of Har Homa. I think it's yes, I do. I guess I do. I think that it was the kind of thing that Yitzhak Rabin could have gotten away with because he had essentially the trust of Yasser Arafat, but that a Bibi Netanyahu could never have gotten away with because he didn't have that trust and didn't have that relationship. And also, he sprung it on Yasser Arafat. He sprung it on King Hussein. You don't surprise your partners in peace in that way. It's not helpful.
That's the key. I think the key issue is not the detail of Hebron or how much what percentage of the West End. The key is Netanyahu doing things that are sending signals that he's not negotiating in good faith. And I think that's what he's saying.
I think Jews should be able to build in Har Homa. So I think the message is correct, but I think the messenger was the wrong one because I think Bibi didn't set it up well enough to be able to deliver the message. Hey, Yasser, I need this. Maybe I'll give you an airport. Maybe I'll give you a dock.
What do you need?
What do you need? Let's work it out. And I think this is a problem, and it's come back to haunt them because there are people who would like, as Charlie says, to jump ship and leave. And now the right wing in his party, they want to jump ship because he signed Hebron. He signed out to Hebron. So this guy is between a rock and a hard place. And I think what will happen, this is a projection, I think if he's not indicted, I think he's going to ask for new elections. And I think
for himself or for the Knesset?
For everything.
Well, for everything.
I think he's going to dissolve everything and try to get a vote of confidence because I'm not sure that he can govern the way he is today. He can under the new law. I mean, he could be a staggered Richard Nixon in a way. But, when you're dealing with a prime minister, it's not the car thief. It's the people believe in you. And if the public loses faith in you, you're out. And that's what I'm afraid could happen here, indictment or non-indictment.
And even before this, I mean, I'm not sure that I would call governing what he was doing in the sense that one day he'd flip this way, the next day he'd flop that way. You really didn't have the sense either that he had a vision of where he was headed or that he had any control over a cabinet that was divided and pressing him to do
I'll tell you an interesting story apropos of that.
things.
I met the manager of the hotel where he was staying the night he won the election. And he walked in and he saw him and he said, "Mr. Prime Minister," and this guy was ashen-faced. He never believed he would be Prime Minister. He didn't set up any positions or anything. He really didn't believe it. So I think you're right. He didn't have a clear...
He wasn't ready.
He was a poll taker.
And the other thing about him is that I think the best criticism of him has actually come from other Israelis, is that Sharansky, and of course part of his government, said the problem, and our problem, Likud's problem, Israel's problem, is that Bibi Netanyahu is playing checkers and Yasser Arafat is playing chess. I mean, one has a short-term vision and the other has a strategic view of what he wants to accomplish and goes out and does it. And there's no contest in tactical shrewdness between Bibi Netanyahu and Yasser Arafat. There simply isn't. I mean, we've seen it. So, at this stage, one wonders how much Israel's really going to lose in terms of this shakeup. They may be better off. I agree with you.
I'll tell you another interesting story. In '75, when Leah Rabin was found with her bank account, I was an attorney involved in that situation. And Yitzhak Rabin, who was never indicted or was never even accused of any criminality, he resigned because he felt that the perception of the country would go down. And so he did it like a man. He went out with elegance. You're nearly at the same place here. That's an $18,000 bank account. That's not a mistrust of government or something. This is Leah Rabin not handling her book affairs too well, or whatever she did over there. And I was with them, literally. I sat with them when they went through that whole process. And I saw the man resign. I was with him the night he resigned. It was like a shiver call. I mean, it was terrible. And, he held up his resignation that night because it was a big soccer or basketball game. And, the country goes crazy over soccer and basketball. And he wouldn't make the announcement till everybody he wanted people to have it. So he had elegance. I don't know what, the police gave a report that doesn't look too good. Whether it's enough to be indictable, that's criminal. Right. But can you be indicted for morality if you're a prime minister? I think that's really the question.
Well, it depends on what he knew. What did he know, and when did he know it?
Well, if the police think that they are suggesting that he should be indicted, now she has a right not to do it.
But there's also another report that came out today in the Israeli press that a large part of the evidence against the prime minister comes from one witness who just happened to be Derry's lawyer, who was a disappointed candidate himself for Attorney General. He wanted to be Attorney General and deeply resented Bibi Netanyahu for not giving him that post.
He's got his own axe to grind.
That's right. So whether or not the credibility of that witness factors into the decision, I don't know, but that's going to be interesting too. I mean, I think the state attorney and Eli Rubinstein have a very, very difficult and complicated
remember him, Eliakim Rubinstein?
Nope.
Yes.
He used to be the secretary of Moshe Dayan during our days at Camp David, and then he went on to become the secretary of the cabinet. And he's had a long, illustrious career in Israel. A pretty straight guy.
Highly regarded, considered one of the really smartest people in
He
Israel.
might not be a Jew today because the new Orthodox rabbinate said that, they're not totally within their confines.
But isn't he very Orthodox?
He wears a yarmulke.
No, but I thought he also wouldn't negotiate on Saturday with the Arabs and
He's
all
Orthodox.
these
He's very
okay.
Orthodox. So have you plugged in at all to your friends in the Middle East about this? Have you talked with them
You mean since the crisis?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it reminds me of the way the Europeans responded to Watergate. The Arabs just don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, they really can't
You're
begin
so true about this water. You're so right.
The way
nothing
the French,
to them.
That's right.
This
the way
is a
the
daily
French,
occurrence.
She's so right. I was in the Senate, and I was talking to a bunch of Europeans when Nixon was involved with the Watergate. They told me, it's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. And I said, he's going down on this. Believe me, you don't understand America. There's fairness and due process. They don't get it. So I think you're absolutely right.
But there is this difference. I think it would be an extraordinary object lesson in democracy for the countries around Israel if to watch this process and realize that the most powerful man in Israel is still beholden to the public,
to the rule of law,
and that he can be he can be forced to resign. He can be voted out. I mean, I think this is an astonishing thing for most of Israel's neighbors to see. So, but as of today, it's still too early. We have to wait a little bit to see the reaction. I think they wanted to get rid of him for different reasons. If this comes along and serves as the opportunity, they'll be delighted. But I think at the moment, the reaction is one of they're incredulous and shocked.
Yeah.
50% of the Israelis that I speak to would love to see him go down. I mean, they really can't bear looking at this guy. And that's
but
half
Leon,
the country.
isn't that the point? 50%. You know,
Exactly.
this Israel, which is divided
No, I
now.
agree with you. And I think what you're saying is absolutely crucial. The fact that there is this type of sentiment, and let's say there is liberal newspapers, and let's say they have the media, and let's say they have even the police, you know, rule of law must sustain itself. If they can't prove a case against Bibi, they can't bring him down. They shouldn't bring him down, and that's the real democracy.
But even if he survives, I mean, I think there's a toll that's being taken in the sense that Israeli society was already polarized.
Right.
You know, it is 50-50. It's not as if there's a dominant mainstream that goes one way or the other. And I think this is just going to add fuel to the flames. The people on the left are going to see the right as not just misguided, but corrupt. And so, you know, the kind of atmosphere in Israel, not unlike attitudes that Americans are having towards their own government when they see in the paper every day these questionable fundraising, questionable this, questionable that. It takes a toll on the kind of social fabric of the state.
Are you aware of the two people who might run against each other if Bibi and Netanyahu did resign? You know who they would be?
Who?
Ehud Barak for the Labour Party and Yitzhak Mordechai, the present defense minister. That would be the new battle, the battle of the generals. Now, Mordechai is an interesting character because when he got out of the army, he was head of Northern Front, and he could have gone with either Labour or Likud. It was like a flip. Both sides wanted him, and I think he just went with Likud, and it worked out this way. And he's become a very effective defense minister. And lo and behold, he could be the next prime minister of Israel. I mean, it's speculation, but those are the two main characters that would play.
He's seen as one of the more moderate voices inside the current government.
Well, he's a Kurd.
Right.
Do you all completely discount the notion still of a national unity government? Do you think that Shimon Peres will be able to resist this last moment that he may ever have to really become a real player again in government and push through the process?
The answer is I think Peres would grab it tonight if he could. The problem is here's the problem, Judy. In order for them to join a unity government, they have to get together on a platform that they agree about. And I'm not so sure they can do that.
That they could find common ground on that.
I have suggested for months that a unity government might be the way to do it because the country is really, you know, it's separated. There's three different countries. And now I want to talk about a little bit of the religious problems they have over there. I mean, it's tough. And today the head of the Jewish Theological Seminary came out with a tremendous edict, I guess, or a statement that, you know, if you don't want to accept me, then we're not going to help you.
He actually called for dismantling the chief rabbinate in Israel.
Extraordinary.
Which is, you know, that's throwing down the gauntlet.
Yeah, but I think Israel started it. I mean, the Orthodox started it. Enough is enough. You know, the country may be divided on issues of peace and security 50-50, but it's not divided on the issue of whether or not Israel is going to be a secular Jewish state. 85% of Israel wants that. So here you have an instance in which a 15% minority, and probably much less than that, wants to impose its definition of what it is to be Jewish on the rest of the country. And now on American Jews as well. All of a sudden people who call themselves Jewish are suddenly no longer Jewish because these people don't think they are. You know what this sounds like? I hate to say it, but it sounds like a lot like the Islamic militants whom I cover, who say, I don't care if you call yourself a Muslim and think of yourself a Muslim, if you don't meet my definition of what it is to be a good Muslim, then you're not. It's the extreme imposing its will on the majority, and I think it's about time that something like this happened.
And you know where Bibi stepped into mud last week when he was here to visit President Clinton, which was not a great meeting, by the way. Clinton and Bibi don't have any chemistry, and no matter what people say, I know it from the inside, they really don't get along. Bibi refused to meet with the representatives of the conservative and reform movement, and then went to meet with a Christian, I don't know, some hard-headed Christian. I don't know who they were. I don't want to, it's television. I don't know. So, he offended maybe 50 or 60% of the people who are really involved with Israel. And these people indirectly could affect what's going on in Israel. I mean, there's power play going on here. That could be tremendous. Yeah. So I think it showed, by the way, he was playing up to the Shas party. Mm-hmm. It showed that he was playing right into the fundamentalists. And it showed that he really didn't care about these tremendous group of Americans who really assist Israel.
I think there's a real fine line between the power of the orthodoxy and their desire to have some effect upon the day-to-day life and whether buses are running. That's one thing. To actually pronounce that other forms of organized Judaism are not Judaism.
You're not a Jew, Charlie.
Is going too far.
Charlie, I don't know. With Judy, I don't know altogether. But with you, I'm sure you're not a Jew. Even though you're going to have a Seder, and even though you probably are a very heartwarm person about Judaism.
Don't jump to conclusions.
I know. And you probably go to shul once in a while.
Well, we've probably all been excommunicated by this pronouncement.
I think we are. We're making an appeal now for the United Christians or something. I mean, it's a very serious problem. I saw Dr. Lamb, who's the president of Yeshiva University, and I said, and I'm a graduate of Yeshiva University, I said, if you don't make a statement highly critical of these rabbis, I mean, you're going to be in rough shape, even at Yeshiva University. And I believe this week he did make that statement, and he publicized it all over the world. But it's a critical time. I mean, no one feels united. No one feels together. Bibi is basically the leader of the Jewish people when you're prime minister, and he doesn't want to meet with 50 or 60% of the Jews. So he's wrapped himself in knuckles a few times.
And also,
why do I feel sorry for him, Judy?
I don't know.
Do I need a shrink?
Why do you feel sorry for him?
You shouldn't.
You see people
He's brought it on himself.
Right.
You don't think I should feel sorry for him?
No, not really.
Are you going to say something? I think I interrupted you, Charlie.
Oh, yeah, just that the kind of principle that's lurking beneath this discussion is tolerance, right? Mm-hmm. That's what's missing. That's what's missing, not just in terms of this debate on orthodoxy versus conservatism, but in the Middle East in general and the whole approach to the Palestinian.
I'll go further. I spoke to a high-ranking Israeli. He said the only thing missing in this country is good leadership and commanders. What you have to be as a leader, and especially in Israel, and not only a politician. You know that with King Hussein. You know what he's been through. I mean, this guy is remarkable. By the way, he's probably one of the most popular people in Israel.
Maybe he should run for
He should run. People love him. They were crying. I talked to people after he visited Israel. The people were crying about King Hussein and how heartfelt he was and how sincere he was. Week before, he wrote this tough letter. Did you know about that letter before it was written?
No.
The one to Bibi.
No.
Yeah, it was a powerful letter.
But, one of the things I found most disheartening was the Arab reaction in the press to that visit, to the condolence visit of King Hussein.
Why did you find?
He was attacked for that visit, even by many Jordanian columnists. Said it's inappropriate to have an Arab leader on his knees before a Jewish family. It shows you how far we still have to go in the Middle East when a gracious, courageous, compassionate act like that can be denounced in your own press.
Okay, you're an expert on that area. Why is that, Judy?
I think it reflects the degree of resentment and bitterness towards Israel. I think we always have to remember that as much as we admire the leadership of King Hussein, his country is still 70%, almost 70% Palestinian, that it's inhabited by people who have lost their homes in Israel, who believe that they still have a right to get those homes back, who keep the keys to their homes near their front doors in Amman. That doesn't go away, and it takes a long time of building trust and relations to make people forget. And some people will never forget. And that's a lot of what you see in the press. Also, other Arabs have not been as helpful as they could be. I think President Mubarak could have been much more supportive of this peace process. You never saw an Arab leader congratulate King Hussein for what he did. The Arabs have been, Egyptian media has been full of the most vicious cartoons, caricatures of Jews, of
Judy
the
served
press.
in Egypt.
It's just very disheartening to see Arab intellectuals still so against the process itself.
That's the key word, the intellectuals.
The
You know, you could
intellectuals.
see it with the poor people, the
Right.
poverty-ridden people, but with the intellectuals. You know, when I went to Egypt, Judy, I think it was 78, 79, Egypt had a great group of intellectuals in one section of Cairo, and they came from King Farouk's days. And all. They really lived well, and they were wonderful people. Are they the same people who are still critical of Israel?
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
A lot of Egyptian intellectuals were Arab nationalists in their youth. They grew up with Nasser and Nasserism. They lived to see their country become a military factor in the region. They lived to see the British out, which was accomplished, and they're very proud of what Nasser and Nasserism did, despite all of the problems, and they have not given up the kind of pan-Arabist, anti-Israeli dream. So that when a group of them met recently in Copenhagen with Israelis who favor the peace process, the intellectuals in Egypt who did that were denounced again in the Egyptian press for meeting with the Zionist enemy. It's almost as if we don't have a peace process.
So then the Israelis say, can we trust the Arabs? So you're back to square one.
Yes, but there again, you know, people who reach out to them often receive a cold shoulder from Israelis, so it feeds on itself.
And the real pity of all of this is that you did begin to see those stereotypes break down.
Right.
Which is partly why we're seeing the reaction, the violence now, is that expectations that Jews and Palestinians could live side by side were building. You weren't there, you weren't over the hurdle, but you were beginning to see those stereotypes break down, and then boom. You know, now they're back. Now there's a sense that there really isn't a way to get over this impasse.
Judy has written a great book about the Islamic...
Coming out in paperback next
Really?
week, yes. God has 99 names.
God has 99 names. We plugged this book. I hope we sold a few
Certainly
copies.
did. Wow, I'm sure you did.
And she's a real expert on it. The question is this: when you have the religions that are so fervent there, can you overcome that and make peace between these people? That's the real question.
I think the Labor government showed you can. I think you can get over these tribal ancient hatreds. You can put these behind you if you want to. If you really believe that that's in your country's interest, you can do that.
And I also think you have to work hard to nurture forms of religion, even if they are orthodox, that still incorporate tolerance towards others.
Absolutely.
Because
Many
that's
Islamic,
key.
quote, fundamentalists, and people don't like to use that word, as
Right.
as you know, but they have a literal interpretation of their faith, but they are completely, in many cases, apolitical, and they certainly are not against peace. So it's only a very tiny minority of both religions.
Same for Jews.
that
As in
believes
Israel.
Exactly.
As in Israel.
In a kind of intolerance. And I think what you said is absolutely right. It's a question of whether or not you're tolerant or intolerant, inclusive or exclusive.
Now you know why he's on the Council of Foreign Relations, on fellowship.
Don't insult me like that.
We're going to cut for a commercial break. We'll be right back and ask the group, if they stay, whether Clinton can put his arm and muscle into this Middle East process. We're back. We're back with Charles Kupchan. Judy Miller had to take a plane to the Middle East to get us some more information. So when she comes back, she'll report to us to find out whether the Islamic fundamentalists are really fundamental. What do you think, Charlie? I think they are.
I think they're fundamental, but they're, the key question is, where are they heading? And I mean, I think this whole clash of civilizations, that Judeo-Christian culture can never get along with Islamic culture, is a bunch of bahooey. It's all a question of figuring out how to live peacefully alongside each other.
You're Jewish, and we know that, and you're proud of it. Are you incensed by what these rabbis did the other day, and by saying that anyone who's conservative or reform is basically not a Jew? Is that
As I said, what most bothers me is the sense that they can make decisions for everyone else, that they can dictate what they think the only form of Judaism should be. They want to be ultra-Orthodox as individuals, fine. But for them to be able to say that if you don't practice as I practice, you're not practicing Judaism, strikes me as not just misguided, but dangerous, because it's very divisive in the Jewish community. And the last thing we need in a Jewish community that's disappearing over time is to be divided up into hostile camps.
I agree with you, and I'm trying to find out why they did it at this point in the history of Judaism, and I really can't comprehend it at this point. I don't know, and it's a very important question.
It may have just been not necessarily time to decision to do it now, but just somebody.
No, I think it's timed, and I think more than that. I think it was a concerted effort by the religious parties in Israel to get these rabbis to speak out in the United States and to make this real political stand, because there's a tremendous debate going on in Israel today about what the ability of the conservative reform rabbis or rabbinate will have in the country. In Israel.
Yeah.
And I think that these rabbis, this is my own opinion, were spurred on, let's say, by the people, the leaders in Israel to do this. I just don't think it's a spontaneous gesture that came out of nowhere. I think this was well-timed and well-planned and had a tremendous effect, especially, I'm sure, on the UJA and Israel bonds.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
The one thing that most worries me is not so much do you go to this shul or this shul, but the effect in Israel. I was there during the election, the week of the election, and I was amazed by the almost hatred that religious people directed towards non-religious and non-religious toward religious. I mean, the way that they were treating each other was reminiscent of the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Right. Oh, no, no question.
That's the beginning of the end when you have a country that already has its own external problems coming apart internally.
I'll take it further. Bar Ilan Street in Jerusalem, which is a main thoroughfare, which the Haredi Jews really want to keep closed because they want to observe the Sabbath,
right.
And the non-observant Jews want it open because it's a main thoroughfare, so they go up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court makes a judgment, and now you see pickets in the streets. They don't want to accept the Supreme Court's judgment. Aaron Barak, who is the chief of the Supreme Court of Israel, is under death threats. And he has to have protection. I mean, everybody's walking around with protection. So fundamentally, what kind of state is Israel becoming? And that's a crucial question.
Right. And you see people leaving Jerusalem.
Absolutely, especially
they
the
move
younger
to
ones.
Tel Aviv, right, because they don't want to be in an atmosphere, number one, where there's that much polarization, and number two, where they feel that they're being dictated to.
By the way, the mayor of Jerusalem's under indictment also. I don't know if you know that.
For what?
Ehud Olmert, also for some... No, he was indicted. He's on trial now for taking political money in the wrong way. That's to use a very quick synopsis of why he's under indictment. So he's in some problems there. Maybe he'll make it. Maybe he won't. Rafal Eitan was under indictment. He got cleared. He's another member of the cabinet. The Attorney General, Yaakov Ne'eman, is under indictment, and he resigned, and then Tzachi Hanegbi came in, and now probably he will be indicted. I mean, it's funny, but not so funny. The government is not functioning. And I'll tell you the way you're going to tell whether a country is doing all right is you watch the stock market. And I'll bet you peanuts to cow seeds that the market's going down in Israel.
By this. Yeah.
All right, let's see. What can Mr. Clinton do now? He's a second termer. He doesn't need the Jewish vote. He doesn't need AIPAC. He doesn't need money from, I hope he doesn't need money from everybody. Maybe he will for a legal defense fund. But in any case, he's got the strength to do things that political people can do as leaders, not only as politicians. Do you sense any tone difference in him, Charles?
Well, I'd say that President Clinton will always think in political terms. You say he's a second termer. He is a second termer.
But it's his character.
He's not going to switch off the part of his brain that says votes, fundraising, as most politicians don't. They're hardwired that way. But I do think that he does have a flexibility to intervene in this process. The key question is, does he think that there's going to be movement? Because he doesn't want to put his neck out on the chopping block, have Dennis Ross go over there, then send Madeleine Albright, and have the whole thing crash and burn, which I think is why, basically, after the meeting with Bibi, they were very quiet, didn't say much had been accomplished, because he wants to see where things are going before he invests his own political capital. So I think if he sees a window of opening, he'll run through it. He'll hop on Air Force One and be in Tel Aviv tomorrow.
Right. He's very popular. Or he was, at least, in Israel.
And he carries a lot of presence, a lot of authority.
Right.
If he senses that it's not working, He's not going to want to put himself in the middle of a failure.
Who spread this rumor about a Camp David? I mean, the parties are not ready for a Camp David right now.
I think it came out of the following calculation in Bibi's mind, which is that he was seen as the person that was preventing the peace process from moving forward. They were blaming him, right? So you then say, let's have a Camp David and move towards a settlement. And two outcomes. Right. One, which is most likely, which is Arafat says, no, we're not ready, in which case Bibi can say, see, they're the ones who are stopping it. Or you move rapidly to some sort of settlement, which probably is less than envisaged in Oslo, and Bibi's the hero. So I think he was trying to get himself out of the pickle, but he didn't work.
Didn't work.
He's stuck. And it's getting worse because he's facing...
You're not very keen on Bibi, are you?
No.
Would you prefer a Labour government?
Yeah, I just think that that there was a historic progress made, and that you took...
And we're losing it.
A few Jews, a few Palestinians, you locked them in Holst's dining room up in Norway where it's cold, and they began to see each other as humans, and they began to like each other, and they began to take interest in each other's kids. And then they went back to Israel, and they built a larger circle like that. And then, boom, you're back into this situation where there's mistrust. They see each other as enemies, not as potential partners. And so I think that's the real criminal outcome of this, and that if anybody's to blame, it's Bibi, because he really did turn the clock back. I think he's the one that has bred more mistrust than Arafat, even though there have been claims that Arafat's been soft on terrorism. I don't really think that that's the case, because it's not in his interests. Who most threatens Arafat? Hamas. Why would he want to strengthen Hamas? He wouldn't. He wants the peace process to move forward, because that is the way to undercut Hamas and strengthen his own political leadership.
I can agree with you about 50%. I think that Bibi didn't use his capital well. I think he should have moved with Arafat very quickly instead of pretending that he's not going to deal with him, that he dealt with him, so he blew it in terms of world opinion. I've met with Arafat. He's a pretty wily character, and I wouldn't call him a saint yet. I
don't think he's a saint. He's shrewd.
Right.
And what does he stand to gain by letting loose people who are going to blow up buses in Jerusalem? Why would that be in his political interest? I don't think it is.
If he was thinking politically, I would agree with you.
I don't think he has control over it.
But that's right.
But I don't think he said, go out and let this bomb off.
Well, he would lose world opinion if he did that, and so it didn't make much sense for him to do it.
Right.
But on the other hand, he's a step one and a step two guy. I mean, he doesn't do the cha-cha in a regular way. He just moves around. I'm not sure I'd put all my trust in
I would definitely put my
Yasser
trust
Arafat. Newt Gingrich comes out with this great speech that he's the most pro-Israeli since Moses. You believe him?
No. I don't like Newt either.
Why?
I think he's a little bit scary in his own way. I think there is something inspired about him, but I tell you, I would not want to see him as
he gets you nervous, huh?
He may make me nervous.
All right, we got a cut for a commercial. We'll come right back and finish our last segment with Charles Kupchan, who is a delight, intelligent, and I can't help it if he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's supposed to be an elitist group, and look at this. He's with us. We'll be right back. We're back, and we got about a minute and a half to go with Charles Kupchan, and that's bad because we love to have him for 2 hours, but we're not on for 2 hours. Charlie, Bob Dole, let's get away from the Middle East for 1 minute before we wish everyone a happy Passover. Bob Dole said he's going to lend Newt the money today. Did you hear that?
To defend him or to pay his fines?
To pay his fine. Why do you think he's doing that?
Probably because he doesn't have much else going on.
No, because I think he wants his wife to run for president of the United States. He made a speech at Harvard the other day, and he's pushing his wife to be the president of the United States, which would make him...
She'd be okay. She's a formidable woman.
He'd be first cook.
Exactly.
Charlie, we got to leave you. We wish you a happy Passover. We wish everyone here a happy Passover, and stay tuned to the Leon Charney Report. Next week we have Marilyn Michaels, who sometimes disguises herself as Barbara Walters, Barbara Streisand. You pick it. She'll give it to you. She's great. She's going to open up in New York. She's coming back on the show. And a week after, that man who never gets on television, Alan Dershowitz, who's written a book about Judaism and what the future is, and he says, not so good. So stay tuned to us. Charlie, happy Passover.
You too, Leon.
And to my audience, happy Passover if you're Jewish. If you're not Jewish, happy Sunday. If you're an atheist, become Jewish or something else. It may help. Who knows? We'll see you.